of trips and the kinds of trips would be extraordinarily complex. It is very, very difficult to predict where we're going to be on Monday, Tuesday, let alone the particular time of the day. And where all of that travel is putting a new demand on our transportation system and infrastructure. This is some additional data, and Alan, who I think is in the room, I borrowed this chart from him in Commuting in America 3. This basically simply shows the commuting pattern. So this, of the 15%, this is the way that 15% is distributed among central city counties and suburbs. A couple of things that are important. Notice the circle on the left. You have about 16.5 million people going into the central city, about half as much reverse commuting. The most important thing is that the suburban commuting dominates, suburb to suburb commuting dominates. Again, what does this mean for the way we plan? Well, actually, it means a couple things. One is this is going to help explain why congestion is where it is. And as a preview of where we're going to go, we need to think about ways that we can expand the opportunity circle in the context of this complexity, in the context of this dynamism. And the bottom line is, and here's sort of the preview here, I'm going to try and run through this so we have enough time for Q&A. We do a terrible job of managing the existing system. I'm going to talk about each one of these things in a little bit more depth. If you think about it, we've got parts of our roads that aren't used at all at various times of the day, others where there's just excess capacity. And it's really hard for us as drivers to sort of figure out where the best road is. What's the best route? Now, if we've been in the region long enough, we kind of know, well, I'm not going to go down State Route 99 at this point because I know what the traffic's going to be like. But there are a lot of other connections that we make. Sometimes we just get stuck in traffic because we weren't thinking, we're caught unawares, we don't really know what the dynamics of the network is. We need to manage the system more efficiently. More importantly, though, we need to build new capacity. This is the thing that is lost in most discussions of transportation policy. I'm going to talk about this in a lot more depth. We need more capacity. And in most places, Seattle included, it's not just about managing the system more efficiently. That's part of it. But even then, you're going to get it. You may be able to get your congestion down to only very severely congested as opposed to extremely severely congested. You need to get beyond that. You need to get to reliably get to free flow traffic. So in capacity, now a big part of what I'll talk about here is how we do that. The other thing we need to do, and this is sort of what I think the data showed before, is we need to redesign the system. We need to think differently about where that capacity is and how we manage that capacity. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, yesterday's answer, which is really the one that we sort of emerged in the 1930s, I'm using Atlanta as the example, is really hub and spoke. The idea is you have this central city core. Everybody works there. People, if they're outside, they're commuting in. And so you have all your roads go into the central city core. And then if you're really ambitious, you put a beltway around it. And then everybody gets on these large capacity highways, and they go into the central city floor, and they leave at the end of the day. And actually, for a lot of places, that worked. In the 1960s and 70s, as I said before, Los Angeles was the only urban region with severe regional traffic congestion. But the problem is, and this works if everybody's doing the same thing, and it's predictable, and you don't have to worry about where someone's going to go. The problem is that is not the way the world works now. It's a very individualized, very customized travel world. What is this? So what does that mean about the way we plan? Rather than thinking about a wagon wheel or a hub and spoke, we need to be thinking about a mesh of roads of different capacities that can handle different volumes at different points of time. I like to think about this as a three-dimensional spider web. Because the problem now is not, the technical term or the jargon that's used is trip chaining, where it's not just going to work, we're now going to maybe having a conference with our teacher of our kid because something's happened at school which we're not happy about. Then we're going on to a meeting and the drive, not that it's from personal experience right now, but my kids are great. They're beautifully in school. Just wonderful kids. But anyway, and then you go on to a meeting somewhere else, or you may meet someone for lunch, or all sorts of different things that can happen that would end up chaining that trip. Well, that means is you're on a lot of different kinds of roads at different times of the day. So what we need to be thinking about is building out the capacity of the road system in this mesh. Now, the interesting thing we run into is that in areas that are built up, it's very hard to build horizontally because we have rights of way issue, we're in urban areas, and certainly I spent a lot of time thinking about existing built-up areas. So we also need to think three-dimensionally. One of the neatest things about the Seattle area is you've got that, because you've got a lot of elevated structures. You've got tunnels. So in many ways, you're ahead of the game in some place like Chicago, which is so used to going spread out that there's a real psychological barrier to thinking about going above the ground, or for that matter, going below. And we're working on a project now to try and figure out what those projects might be. But there's an important psychological barrier, but we're also finding in areas with heavy congestion, this is actually cost effective. And we'll talk about that in a few more minutes as well. If we're going to look at the spider web and how it would work out sort of in the real world as opposed to just theory, Houston's not a bad case. And in fact, you can see this as a Google map. They actually need more beltways, more circular roads to try and build in this high capacity. But if you'd actually go down into the neighborhood level, particularly inside that, well, this is labeled the 610, you will find that you have this grid roadway that allows for an incredibly robust system of channeling traffic in different ways. Now, Seattle's a bit different because you can't really go out very easily. You've got a lot of water that you have to get over. So what that really means is that, by the way, it doesn't mean that the spider web isn't relevant. Because look at the spider web exists, that mesh of roads is necessary because the way travel has changed. So we're not saying, so the question is, how do you develop that mesh of roads when you're faced with the kinds of challenges you are in Seattle? That actually gives you a bigger rationale for doing the three-dimensional part. How do you accommodate that in important ways? So the bottom line is the capacity expansion that exists has to meet 21st century travel patterns. And we can't use old way of planning this. The key is going to be putting it in the right place, the right capacity, at the right time. And of course, there's a real practical problem. How do you do that? Well, and we talk about the big part of our book, half of our book is really focused on how do you actually accomplish this stuff. So, and here's the question, because how many people here have heard the term, we cannot build our way out of congestion? All right. Actually, for someone who hasn't looked at travel for further back than 10 years, I can understand where they might think that. But as I already mentioned, if that's true, now we only have one region with severe regional traffic congestion in 1982. We built our way out of it. We laid a lot of asphalt and a lot of pavement to do that. Now, I will be the first to say, that is not necessarily, and in fact today, that is not the most efficient way to do it, but we did it. We built our way out of congestion. You can do it now. Actually, I can figure all sorts of engineering ways that you could build. Seattle could build its way out of congestion. It's not necessarily, you wait, so we can do it. The question is how to do it, and how do you make it work? And I don't believe in just laying asphalt. And not only that, we've added capacity in some pretty bizarre places, like Southern California. Notice that what happens, this is the 91 express lanes in Southern California. The 4 middle lanes were added. And notice that it's free flow on the inside lanes, and it's congested on the outside lanes. The way they achieve that is pricing. I'm going to get back to that in a few minutes. But even in California, they can have roads. Tampa added this wonderful piece of infrastructure. Recently, opened up about a year ago, Tampa Crosstown Expressway. And despite the financial problems with Boston's Big Dig, it was a huge engineer, and actually realized we had did have the issue of the falling tiles, but for the most part, the engineering behind that worked. The important thing about tunnels, and what we have to figure out is why we had a problem in Boston when the rest of the world was building tunnels just fine. Thank you very much. I mean, you look at Australia, you look at Spain, Austria, Switzerland, they can build tunnels without any problem. Somehow we have to figure out how we make that happen in the US. I'm not really sure why that happened, but actually, in many ways, the Boston Big Dig was a success.